Hello Year 3 and welcome to your talk writing lesson. This is lesson 2 for week 3 in term 6. So it's our term where we're learning all about France and Paris, and our talk writing lessons this week are based on the stories of Madeleine. And you should already have watched at least one Madeleine story, and after this lesson I'd like you to watch another one. So you've watched a few by the end of the week. So we were using the stories of Madeleine to inspire us to write our own poetry. Madeleine is a narrative poem. That means it's a story, but it's also a poem. And in our last lesson, we had a go at writing our own rhyming poems. But this lesson, we're going to have a go writing a poem about France. And we don't need to make it rhyming. We're going to use the poetry toolkit instead. So we made a poetry toolkit in school when we learnt about shape poems, when we wrote our own shape poems. Do you remember what goes in a poetry toolkit? Can you pause this video and have a talk with the person you're with about what you remember being in the poetry toolkit? Good. Okay, so let's have a look. There we are. Did you get any of them? So the first thing is simile. A simile is when you say something is like something else, or it is as tall as something else. So you could say the sun is like a light, or you could say the sun is as bright as a torch. Those are similes. Metaphors. Do you remember what a metaphor is? When you say something is something else. So instead of saying the sun is like a light, you would just say the sun is a light. The sun is an oven. The sun isn't actually an oven, is it? But what that metaphor is telling us is that an oven is very hot and the sun is very hot. So it's telling us about how hot the sun is. Onomatopoeia, do you remember? Using noises, words that are a noise. Bang, crash, slither, okay, noise words. Alliteration. Alliteration is using the same letter at the beginning of the word, so repeating the first letter. Burning bright, okay, or fantastic find. Repetition, using the same word again and again. And the power of 3. We've done a bit of work on the power of 3, just using 3 things, 3 adjectives maybe, or 3 sentences, creates a good effect. And we used all of these features of the poetry toolkit when we wrote our shape poems. So what we're going to do is we're going to use those features to create our own poem about Paris. First of all, I would like you to brainstorm all the different landmarks that are in Paris. So what a brainstorm is, I've written Paris in the middle of my page. I've got lines coming out, and at the end of each line, I'm going to write a landmark. So I can start you off at the end of one line, I'm going to write the Eiffel Tower. So pause this video, please, and write down all of the different Paris landmarks. Good, so you should have done that now. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a poem out of our landmarks. So we're going to start with the name of the landmark, and then we can add different features from our poetry toolkit. I might add a metaphor, simile, alliteration, onomatopoeia, the power of 3, or repetition, okay? You can choose what you want to use. You don't have to use all of them. So the Eiffel Tower is, have a go, you don't need to write anything down yet. Talk to the person you're with. How could you finish this first part of the poem? Maybe try to have 2 or 3 lines, or maybe 3 or 4 lines actually. Here, the Eiffel Tower is. Could you use a metaphor to finish that sentence? How could you describe the Eiffel Tower? Can you get any alliteration in there or any repetition? Pause the video and have a talk. Okay, I wonder what you came up with. Here was what I came up with. The Eiffel Tower is a shining sword. So that's my metaphor. Like a skyscraper, that's my simile. Towering tall, that's my alliteration. Ablaze with 1,000 lights. So I'll read that all together. And ablaze with 1,000 lights doesn't have any features of the poetry toolkit except that it's descriptive language. So the Eiffel Tower is a shining sword, like a skyscraper, towering tall, ablaze with 1,000 lights. Would you now like to write down your own stanza or verse? We call these little bits of a poem about the Eiffel Tower. So let me go back. Here we go. The Eiffel Tower is. How are you going to complete your verse about the Eiffel Tower? Pause this video, write down your own ideas. Okay, so you should have written the beginning of your poem, which is going to be about the Eiffel Tower. And here, let's move on. Our next Paris landmark, the Louvre Museum. What are you going to write about the Louvre Museum? And essentially, you're just going to carry on, using different Paris landmarks to write your poem, making sure that you use features from the Poetry Toolkit. Okay, I hope that that is clear, and I really look forward to seeing these on Tapestry. Good luck, Year 3.